Welcome to the Unbuild It podcast. This is Switzerland Siga trip to day 2. Again, Steve Basic was unable to attend this trip. He had a previous engagement. So my weekly co-host this week is Tim Uhler from Awesome Framers or Pioneer Homes.
Good to be here. Yeah, this is fun.
Thank you. Tim's giving up time to walk around and see cool stuff to record the podcast with us. And our other normal host, Peter Yost, has been given instructions by his physician that he is too old to travel now. And so therefore, Peter is not here. And we are joined by Belinda Carr. Welcome, Belinda.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And real quick before we get started, YouTube and Instagram, right?
Minimal presence on Instagram. I'm a little bit intimidated by how active all of y'all are on TikTok and Instagram. I feel very, very old on this trip, surprisingly.
You're probably the smartest one out of all of us.
I highly doubt that. But
it takes a lot. I think if we realized how much energy it takes to be that active on Instagram.
Yeah. Well, it's just bathroom breaks.
Yeah,
so that you can post
That's
something.
a lot of bathroom breaks, Jake. You must drink a lot of water mid-gas.
Okay, so day 1, we learned a bunch of stuff at the Siga factory, and it was kind of almost in a vacuum. We hadn't seen what Swiss construction looked like yet. We hadn't seen where their frame of reference comes from, because they don't just make stuff for North America. It kind of is. They make stuff for Europe and a global market that just happens to apply somewhat to what we do in the United States. And so you have to assume that their manufacturing process and the way that they're oriented as a company didn't start with being oriented to the North American market. So it has to have some things about it that are different. And I think that yesterday, all those little things made a little more sense. So we got to see 2 different types of construction. Does somebody want to volunteer to talk about the first one that we saw?
Yeah, the modular. Some people asked me on Instagram last night, when I think of modular in the States, it's different, right? This was like pre-fab, but the way that they're modular is that those sections can be joined sideways, from all 4 directions, or go up. And then over time, you can also come back and decide you want to add another level. So your initial buildings, it's a hospital with 2 floors. We want a 3rd. And so they can bring it out and set it up very quickly.
Yeah, so the modular nature of it, as I understood it, there is a precast concrete slab that's set into a metal framework, and that metal cube that has no walls, it's just corner posts, and then that metal cube can be plugged up against any other metal cube as long as they know that might happen at some point, which is okay, yeah, it's Legos. Every piece interlocks with every piece. But what I thought was really interesting is they have 2 business models, and one is that, and the other one was just panelized construction. And he was just yeah, sometimes we can't do the plug and play thing. Sometimes we have to use panelized construction. And I was for them to have that frame of reference in both directions where they have that knowledge base, it's got to make them better at both, because they have to understand how parts go together on each side. And then I'm sure there's something that they do that they're both.
I didn't see the panelized construction. Did they have some samples in their factory?
They did. In that huge back room, they had a house on 3 trailer, their trailer beds without the wheels on them. They pulled the trailer underneath of it, pulled the legs off, and they were ready to go. So they had 1 residential construction project in there at the moment.
And the rest was just a McDonald's split into 23 different
How
modules.
American coincidence that we came all the way here to watch someone put together a McDonald's. It was 3 stories. Did you see the plans for it?
No, I thought it was 2.
They
3
had
stories?
They had it posted on one of those side walls where it was man, we stood there. Greg and I stood there looking at it going, okay, this one is that one over there. This one. And I was just this is totally Legos. This is completely I can see how the pieces fit together thing. From a construction method, I thought it was cool that just like in the United States, there was a bunch of those little cubes that had ratchet straps going diagonally on them. I was that one wasn't square, and they had to fix it.
Gotta pull it.
But you made the comment I could do all this on site in 45 minutes when we saw the CNC machine with a chainsaw, and you're being slightly facetious when you said that.
Last time I said something like that and I had to follow it up, I was in pain for a week. I'm getting a little too old to hustle like that. Yeah, watching the so the one thing I really appreciated was seeing how all of their lumber's laminated. So it's pieces glued together and then finger jointed in long lengths, nice and straight. But watching essentially the CNC machine cut rafters, I think I've recorded it and timed it from start to finish. It was a little less than 3 minutes per, what with it, like 4x10 rafters.
Yeah, 4x10 rafter that had a dado on two sides to accept some framing members and a notch on both ends and a bird's mouth and everything. And it's like, yeah, I can do that, but it's a heck of a lot easier to just load it into the machine than carry it away from the machine.
Yeah, especially if you want to be accurate. I could do that in 45 minutes. They would not be identical.
No, they wouldn't.
There's no way. And the guy that was running that machine had been there for 30 years.
Yeah.
So he was probably in his early 60s, maybe?
I was going to say 35.
Yeah.
It's a good math joke. I like math jokes. So I want to hear the architect's perspective on what we saw yesterday.
I did like the hybrid nature of all those modules. Like it wasn't that metal or wood is the only way to go. They had the concrete base. They had these metal posts. They had wood integrated into the panels, and it was them embracing all different types of materials and work and seeing how they can come together in this futuristic off-site modular method of construction. Like in the States, if this were done in the States, it would be just wood. Or there's this one company in Grand Junction, Colorado, that makes these panels, but just out of metal, and that's it. They embrace this one path and go down that one path. And I think if you try to make different kind of materials work together, you can push the technology much further. I think it was disappointing to see how reliant on manual labor the whole process was, because I think a lot more steps could have been automated. This is one TV show we watch, Grand Designs, and they have a lot of the homes that they build in this TV show are manufactured in Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. And whenever they record footage of the construction of these homes, most of it is automated. They have all these different kind of machines that tilt up these systems, and even the assembly, everything is automated. It seemed like a lot of this was still manual labor involved in the casting of the stairs, beautiful, mm-hmm. Everything was like very highly finished, but there was a lot of human intervention in it. And like when he talked about the turnaround process, he said it takes about a year to get these structures fully completed, assembled on the job site and stuff. And if it's going to be more expensive, it's not really going to be faster. What's the incentive to really switch over to offsite modular?
And he did say it's more expensive.
Yes.
Which is like, that's the first time I've heard a prefab company
admit
this
to that.
Costs more.
Yeah.
If you've ever priced it, it costs more. Like, I don't care how many times you tell me, oh, we're making this many houses this year and we're going to save this much money. No, you're not. Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah,
even here.
The big selling point was basically you can put it together on site quickly.
Yes, but it's not that it's made quicker.
Yeah.
You can say it's assembled quicker, marketed as being built quicker, but it's not being built quicker. So that was disappointing.
Yeah, maybe just less time on site.
Yeah.
But that doesn't tell the whole story.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And he did mention that a lot more of what they do is able to be recycled as well, which, again, I've never seen a building be recycled. I fully understand that someday we may be short enough on materials that it becomes more of a thing. And I think that we should be working towards that. It's just one of those other, like, it's still not a selling point for me. Like when people are like, oh, well, we should use cellulose because we can recycle it. Not once have I seen anybody.
I mean, the whole reason we have such a massive problem with plastic is because it can be recycled. It can definitely be recycled. It can be it can be separated into 7 different types of plastics. Like if you actually look at plastic bottles and all that, yes. So that tells you what type of plastic it is, and it can definitely be recycled, but it's not cost effective. The same in construction, like you just said, we can definitely break down buildings, separate them into individual parts. And I think there's a company in Texas that does that. I think they're called Unbuilders. but it's just not cost effective to do that.
Yeah. And so at what point does it become like, it's so challenging to know when this is actually like, is this our lifetime?
Yeah.
I wonder, you know?
It's starting to feel that way.
Yeah.
That is going to happen during our
Yeah.
lifetime.
Yeah.
Maybe not scaled up, but, just being here, seeing the temperatures in Europe, seeing wildfires in Western Washington or Western U.S., and just how quickly things seem to be changing, it just wouldn't surprise me if like the next 5 years we got to that point where, like they're talking about, we might not have access to food like we always have in the U.S. Ukraine can't ship out to other countries. All these things, and it could just be that we get to that point where, like us as builders, we might have to start like salvaging, right? Because we can't get that one thing. The project that we visited for Huber in San Diego back in December, he had been waiting on a giant window for like 8 months.
Yeah.
And when we saw him in June, it was not any better.
Yeah, it is.
And so then at that point, do you go, well, I got to get the house done. We got to get it closed in. So do I have to go and salvage something?
Yeah. Do I put a wall here?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So you're saying that maybe construction is going to switch over to people salvaging materials, hoarding inventory, and then that determines what the design is, what the eventual outcome
Maybe.
is.
Yeah.
Like a window opening is determined by what you have in stock
Yeah.
currently.
Yeah. Because you got to get the house done, right?
Yeah.
And because we've done that with suppliers where you're like, I don't really want to go to Home Depot for that one window that we decided to add last minute. But it's either that or what? You just
You wait
let the
12
house-
weeks
Yeah.
to finish the house. Yeah. Or more.
It might, but maybe not on a big scale. It just might be kind of like for people like us that can make those decisions where you got to just get it done.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So one of the other really cool things, they had a couple production tables in that back room where like the bulk of the work was going on. And one of the production tables had two gable walls that had windows cut out already. And they had an inset above the window, almost like a blind pocket, but it's on the outside. And that's one of those things that, like, when I look at Europe, it's one of the things that I think they have figured out way better than us. So in Europe, it's common to buy the window, the metal extension jamb to match the window, and the blinds all from one manufacturer in one shot, and the blinds go on the outside of the window. From an energy efficiency standpoint, if I can make it so that the sun never hits my window, i.e. it's in the shade, that window never gets hot. That window never makes my room hot. My window performs better. I mean, right now we're recording in a back room, and the first thing I did was close the blinds on the outside, and it got way more comfortable in here. And I was kind of upset that I didn't do that when I walked in here 45 minutes ago.
Well, that's what we were just talking about, is that by the end, which is super interesting, but I was struggling to kind of keep my eyes open. It would have been nice to have some fresh air.
So I wonder if that's a CO2 thing, or if that's just it got warm in here because we were all in here.
And these have been long days.
They have been
They've
long
been
days.
good, but long days.
Late nights and early morning, lots of bus rides.
Yeah.
Okay, so we didn't note it. DM Bao, BAU, is the company that we went to. I actually looked for them on Instagram and didn't see them.
Yeah, I couldn't find them.
I'm sure you can find them online.
They're on YouTube.
They buy a lot of stuff from Siga. That's why Siga had the influence to go, hey, can we bring a bunch of people and let them crawl around your plant? Also, I should note that especially there, and even today, we'll get to day 3 on another podcast. One of the things that I like most about Europe is people being treated like adults. Like, we were allowed to just walk around the plant and nobody got hurt. They said, please don't go in this area. And that was it. And it was just like, if that was the United States,
like
it would
stalking you.
Yeah.
And,
It would have been like we were joking the other day, the rope with all the rings on it for the toddlers to cross the street. Like, that's the way we get treated there. And it's a weird thing. I had a friend go to the Goodwood Festival of Speed in England, and I think it's north of London in Goodwood. And it's just this private property that they open up and have all sorts of races and cars, car show and everything. And he was like, yeah, they gave me my beer in a glass and there were no ropes around the cars. And I was just standing looking at a $5 million Ferrari, and my glass of beer might have dropped on the Ferrari, but nobody did. And we all acted like adults. And I thought of that all day yesterday when we were at DM Bao. It was just like oh, you're fine.
Yeah, we climbed that set of winder stairs.
Yeah,
like precast.
immediately.
we're all at the top hanging out, taking pictures of connections. And I'm like, in the States, like even for our job sites, there's no way, like we can't be 6 feet higher, right? Without some kind of guardrail or fall protection. Yeah. Well, thankfully nobody did fall.
They would have regretted their choice. Okay. So then back on the bus, lunch, and then back on the bus again. And we went to a multifamily job site, and I don't know the name of the company that was doing it. I don't even think I took a picture of their sign. We'll put it in show notes or something. But it was very interesting. So a lot of the conversation that we've had has been about like regulation. If you want to do X, you have to do all this paperwork. You have to get approval from the city and all those sorts of things. Very much sounds like, New York City, like the pain in the butt that you might have to go through. But if you look around, the communities look very homogenous. They all look cared for. There is, it seems like it's okay with the people that live here. So fine. I don't live here. It doesn't matter to me if I feel like it might be cumbersome to build here. They had torn down a tile production facility, a roof tile production facility. And the site manager was telling me that this 18-unit building that they were building, they had 400,000 francs worth of diesel fuel remediation on the property before they could start building. And it didn't impact the budget. Like, they have a big enough budget for that 18-unit building that, like, it wasn't a big deal that they had to spend $400,000 on remediation because the lot was. So that tells you the level of expense it goes to just build an 18-unit building. The other thing is, I was having a conversation with Etienne the other night about homes and property values and everything here, and he said the land is way more expensive than the building. Therefore, if you sell a piece of land, anybody who buys it's putting multifamily on it because they can't afford to build a single family home and pay the mortgage off of, So that's an interesting concept that we just don't adhere to in Dallas, Washington, or Missouri. Like it's
where land is so easily available.
Yeah. And okay, drive 5 more minutes. Drive 5 minutes out of town. So I'm curious to hear takeaways from that. Like, what was your impression of it?
It was very, very different than any other job site I've seen in the States, for one, because everything seemed overdone, in my opinion. The walls were ridiculously thick. The floor slabs were, and there was an intention why, because they were trying to get to passive house standards, and it was extremely well insulated, but it seemed like an extremely heavy building. Like the amount of material that went into that could have been used for three units of a similar size, 3 buildings of a similar size. So that was my first impression. But I did want to say that, yes, it was extremely expensive, and like I didn't know that they spent so much on soil remediation, but it was like the creme de la creme of construction.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen all across the country. I'm sure people build just as cheaply as we do in the States, and put up multifamily units. This was one of the best construction sites we've ever seen.
Yeah.
That's why
Siga's not going to take us to
the
dumpy below grade contractor. Yeah. So yeah, let's talk wall assembly. Let's do building science deep dive real quick. The wall assembly on this building was a 2x10. It looked like a 2x10.
3x10, basically.
3x10 with maybe an R6 continuous on the outside, mineral wool stuffed in the cavity, and then gypsum board with tape as the air barrier. So that's like effectively the structural wall. And if you're following along closely, that's completely vapor open and no barriers really. And then they had a 2x3 channel that they were adding to all the interior walls inboard of everything that I just described, where your inboard of your air barrier then, because they were taping the gypsum, and inboard of that is all of their, we call it Smurf tube in our market, flexible conduit that's like corrugated, that then they're fishing everything through, and then they insulate over top of that.
From the walls that I saw, they had blocking on the inside of that exterior drywall, and then another layer of drywall And so they used insulation on both sides of that.
Yeah. And so it's one of them's an air barrier and the other one's the plaster face that you'll get to see that looks pretty, which makes perfect sense from a like, well, if somebody wants to hang a picture, they're not poking a hole in your air barrier. But at the same time, like you're saying, the number of layers in this assembly, I was blown away as well. Like, and the floor assembly where it was CLT floor, like 6 inches of loose pea gravel, basically, that had some sort of binder to make it kind of stay in place. And then it was going to be insulation and then lightweight concrete over top of that with heated floor in it, right?
Yeah, so lightweight concrete, then the heated floor, radiant tubes, and then another layer of concrete over that. It's funny because the first factory we visited was about offsite modular, simplify construction, and then the second site we visited, like the actual job site, was about how complex can we actually make this building? How many materials can we put together? How thick can everything be? It was the complete opposite mentality almost.
Was it R48 wall?
It was an R50.
R50.
Yeah. So they don't use R value here. So we did a calculation based off of the plans that he showed us and the view factor that they had available. So math wise, it's right at an R50.
So I kind of shut down mentally walking into that building where I don't have multifamily as a background. And seeing that level, I think Belinda hits it. It seemed like there were so many repeated steps. And I don't understand the building science. That would be really cool to spend time on. So from a guy that works on the structural side, walking in and seeing how perfect all the concrete work was on the main level, I was looking for cold joints, pour lines, like anything, nothing, smooth walls, and all of their door jambs that were preset before the floor work was done.
Yeah.
Everything was perfectly flush. I wanted to find a level and check for plumb. And so the thing that impresses me...
You could take the framer off of his job site, but you can't take the job site out of the framer.
No. Is even like looking at the mock-up behind us, I'm like, look at all of these layers, but every layer was done meticulously well. Like the way that the windows were taped to whatever layer they were on, that tape looked perfect.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether it's hidden or whether they put in 100% on every single layer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think that this stems from the fact that maybe they grew up in a building that's older than the United States? Like that it's been in your family for generations, you think differently about buildings?
Yeah.
That you go, well, I'm building this to last 500 years, so I'd have to...
But again, I think that building was an exception. It would be unfair to generalize all construction in Switzerland as exceptional because we visited an exceptional building. That was a one-off. It was done meticulously because there was an intention behind it, and they want to make an exceptional multifamily home that meets passive house standards and works extremely well. But I don't think that philosophy is applied throughout the country. Do
you feel like I felt like that philosophy was applied a little or for the most part to the prefab manufacturer though too? Like they seem to be meticulous and doing a really good job and building above what I would think of as standard in the United States, at least, Well,
I haven't visited a similar prefab.
Yeah, we haven't just snuck
factory.
on to. Yeah, we need to just see if they can pull over at what we think looks like a dirty job site, like wherever we can find trash.
Well,
outside.
yeah, I know, because we were up in Lauterbrunnen and then Wengen, and there was a lot of newer homes. You could tell the wood siding. It looked like the wood that we're looking at here versus the house next door that looked like it might be 100 years old. And
I was curious about that because we visited Lauterbrunnen and Muren too, and a lot of the older homes, the wood was charred. So that's a Japanese technique where they char the surface to prevent it from aging. But the newer buildings weren't.
Yeah.
And I didn't know why they would do that because that sort of fresh pine would automatically deteriorate much faster than charred pine. And I wonder if they wait a few years and then they char
maybe.
it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Could be. Or some things, if it really is on a rain screen the size that we saw the other day that was like 1.5 inches, if you're putting up thick enough wood, you might have 100-year siding at that point.
Because the outer layer automatically weathers and protects things behind it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you think about a barn that's never been conditioned, there are barns all over the United States that are 150 years old.
Yeah.
And it's like, but The problem is when you put conditioned forces on them and you cause different vapor drive, and you don't just have things that can just wet and dry. You know, a log will last a lot longer across a creek than it will sitting on the ground, sort of thing. I did want to talk with you, Tim, as we start to wrap up here. We're not in a huge hurry, but I wanted to talk to you about some of the construction methods and the tools that they were using on the job site. Did you see the insulation saw?
Only in everybody's reels.
Okay.
Yeah, somehow I walked right past that.
So if you think of the...
kind of like the saws at Home Depot. But
that's
they have
exactly where I was at.
Yeah, panel saw.
I was looking for the word panel saw, and I was going to say Home Depot, exactly. They had a panel saw, basically, that was still a hand saw, or serrated blade, for cutting mineral wool, and the reason that they had that is they were taking that meticulous time. And there was one wall that, sorry, let me back up. The width of material that they had, the insulation, was not appropriate to stand vertical in the studs that they had without stripping 2 inches off of it for the full length of the bat. So they were turning all of the bats sideways, which sounds totally like us. Like, oh, we can't get the insulation? Let's waste 50 days cutting insulation so that it'll fit. But it was all turned on its side, cut to the width of the stud bay, and then they were using all the little scraps. So there was a spot that was like at head height of like pieces. 4-inch by 4-inch pieces, but there was no, like, you couldn't slide a playing card in around them. And I was kind of just blown away. And I was like, I didn't even know that anybody made one of these. I mean, it makes sense. Why wouldn't you? But then the other thing that we've talked about already, cranes. Every job site that we've seen has had a little gantry crane, something with a 70-foot arm or something on it where you can reach the majority of the job site with the crane. And we'll talk on the next one about the trade school, but one of the comments from the trade school was the bulk of people leaving the industry right now are 35 to 40 years old. And so they're trying to change the way they do construction in Switzerland to make it not backbreaking. And when we were here in January, I thought the same thing. I wonder if I could afford a crane. I wonder what the cost to own one of those little, and they're electric. And the site super yesterday at the job was saying, you pay a monthly rental on the crane. You generally have at least 2 guys on site that are qualified to run the crane. So like you might have a guy that's cutting insulation who's also... We have the window open if you hear the scooter going by.
And the crane behind you swinging as you were talking.
Is it?
It was like very apropos. Yeah.
And now I lost my train of thought. Scooters get me excited, I guess.
Cranes. Cost of the crane.
Yes.
And
Monthly
maybe
rental.
for the sake of the podcast, if I hear you and Ben Bogey talking about a joint venture on a crane one more minute, I might force you to just buy one.
It's a monthly rate that they pay to have the crane on site. They always have at least 1 or 2 people on site that are qualified to hop on it and do whatever lift they need. But then they also pay by the hour that it operates or by the lift. And he was like, it's $140 an hour for when you have the crane turned on, or it's $50 a lift. And they can change how they bill at all times, like on a weekly basis or a daily basis or something. And he was like, so sometimes we pay by the hour. Sometimes we pay by the lift. And he's like, it depends on who's here and who's operating the crane and what task they're doing. Because it's like, well, you might want to pay by the hour if all you're doing is picking pallets of insulation up to the 3rd floor real quick, because you might get 6 lifts in an hour, where it's going to be a lot more if you pay by the lift. And I was like, that's a really interesting, it also, how European, we're going to bill you twice for the thing that you've already paid for. I'm like,
it's just a different thought process here, because when we were here back in 2009, that was the first thing I noticed was every residential site had a crane, a small crane.
Yeah.
And we have an old family member, Adolf's
even
like,
single family.
Yeah, yeah. Like, so you're seeing that all up where we were at in Lauterbrunnen and up there. It's just a different, like your point about trying to make it less backbreaking. They're using bigger pieces of wood than we use.
Yeah.
We're packing 2x4s, and everything they had yesterday was a 3x10, And so it's like, okay, everything feels more substantial here. So that's just got to be part of the the Swiss way of doing things.
We're going to have another podcast just on windows and doors and how more substantial they are compared to the States.
Well, so the one window, did either of you operate that big sliding glass door?
Yeah.
And you just barely push it?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I could lift that thing into place, but to push it, I think a 2-year-old could make it move.
I mean, that's the sales point that I use for the European windows that are in my house. We have 14-foot wide patio door that's 7.5 feet tall, and the operating panel is 5 feet wide, and it weighs 480 pounds. And my daughter, who is 5 when we moved in, can slide it back and forth without having to huff and puff. Like, yeah.
Wow.
So everything they do has that way. Doesn't it just kind of feel? I appreciated Belinda's point. It would be kind of nice to go prowl around some job sites just to see, because that building yesterday really was.
We just got to look for people with no sleeves, and then we can find the appropriate job site.
But even the little farmer houses,
Yeah.
little in quotes, they still had a crane.
Yeah.
And it's just they've all got their decks that cantilever out from the house, giant overhangs, exposed wood. It was kind of cool to see how the timbers kind of gradually went past each other. And so everything just feels heavy here. And so now I understand why everybody on YouTube keeps saying, why do you guys build with cardboard and sticks? Mm-hmm. By comparison, that's what it looks like. So it's just a different thought process. I mean, Adolf, our friend, they have a family house that's been in the family for centuries. And so he'd come back to Switzerland for a re-roof. Helicopter brings up it's just a different way of building. But it's entwined.
It's a slower mentality, too.
Yeah. And even the instructors here, I don't know, I really appreciate I feel like going back to the U.S., I don't think I'm always in a hurry, but I think by comparison I am. It's like, slow down a little bit. Make things last longer. Maybe we'll last a little longer, too, on top of it.
Okay.
That's for sure. That's one big difference. Like, everything's so intense in the States. Fast paced, go, go, go. Everyone's on a mission. Over here, everyone's just like, let's think about this. Let's take lunch, an extended lunch, drinks, dinner, and then maybe come back tomorrow and then figure out a better way to do it.
I think that's going to be our closing thought for today. Thank you guys for joining me today. Stay tuned for Switzerland Day 3.
And go follow Belinda on YouTube.
Yes, follow Belinda and unfollow Tim, because you can only follow one or the other.
Law of averages, and then that's okay. Yeah, you'll get way more bang for your buck.
And if you have any questions about what happened here, it's Building Right Peter on Instagram. Have a good day.